So, like, I caught up on Zenless Zone Zero, and I may or may not be completely obsessed with Hugo Vlad. I knew this would happen when they cast Jun Fukuyama as a tall, heterochromatic, long-haired man who embraces his moral ambiguity. That's like 5 whole weaknesses all at once. My interest was especially piqued when I noticed that Hugo actually has a lot of symbolism in common with Kaeya from Hoyoverse's other title, Genshin Impact. Yes, I'm serious, just hear me out, I promise you it will be worth it. Since I cannot get these thoughts out of my head, and I need to put them somewhere, I decided this would make a good, shorter video to put out while my longer scripts that have triggered the procrastination demon are staring at me from the other Google Docs tab. Menacingly. Menacingly! I also want to talk about this because I think these similarities are very, very intentional and meant to foreshadow potential upcoming Kaeya lore, since we know version 5.6 of Genshin will be taking us back to Mondstadt. While getting to know Hugo, something about him just sparked this memory of an older Ashikai theory relating to Kaeya. Ashikai has pointed out multiple times now that this one Tlingit myth, which has been written into a children's story about a raven who stole the sun, can be related back to Kaeya. Yes, I know peacock symbolism is most commonly associated with Kaeya, but this whole comparison to this myth still really, really works. And okay, I know we are already talking about Genshin Impact and Zenless Zone Zero, but now I have to talk about Honkai Star Rail real quick. Because you see, on the newest planet which the Astral Express crew has found themselves trailblazing, Amphorius, a majority of the world has been trapped in an Evernight, while the city of Okima is stuck in an eternal day. The sun on Amphorius was actually the Sky Titan Aqula's eye, and this eternal night began when she closed her eye. Aquila also happens to be a peacock. And her eye looks like these Nazar Bonjour from Turkey, which is also what Fairy's appearance is based off of. So yeah. Meanwhile, the treasure hoarder insignias seem to feature a raven on them. And Kaeya seems to have pretty strong ties to the treasure hoarders. He is also a descendant of Conria's Eclipse dynasty, so the theory ultimately draws on these elements. Plus, the devs love to reference a story often referred to as the Ring Cycle in order to tie this myth back to Kaeya. Now, at first it was based on absolutely nothing but vibes, but I started thinking about this whole Raven who stole the sun thing as I was getting to know Hugo Vlad through the epilogue story, Bury Your Tears with the Past. But then with Hugo's family name turning out to be Ravenlock, I realized this definitely wasn't just about vibes. His signature W engine even looks like the sun. Now before I get any further into this, I'd like to go over each character's background and then tie things together in an analysis at the end. I'll start with Kaeya since we go way back. He is my original beloved of the Hoyoverse.
ほう、俺の熱い気持ちに応えてくれるとは。どうやら俺の誠実さが伝わったようだ。
Kaeya is the adopted son of the Ragnavinder family, making him Diluc's adoptive brother. Very little is known about Kaeya's past from before he was taken in by Diluc's father. Kaeya may have lost his eye in a fight against his brother, as mentioned in a letter from the Hidden Strife event. Though Kaeya and Diluc's values as well as their approach to things may differ, they both have their own ways of looking out for Mondstadt. And when they work together, their synergy as brothers who share a strong bond definitely comes through. In the modern day, Kaeya works for the Knights of Favonius as cavalry captain. He's a flirty, shrewd little bastard who is always maxing out on his sussy baka energy. Not just because he's the cavalry captain in a city where there has never been a single visible horse. It's also because he has a significant information pipeline among questionable groups like the Treasure Hoarders and the Fatui, despite the fact that Eula is actually the head of intelligence. Why does a cavalry captain of horses that aren't real operate so much like an intel guy? Why is Kaeya always hanging out with the Fatui? Only this sussy baka knows. On a deeper level, Kaeya is one of only 2 playable characters that are confirmed descendants of the fallen nation of Kanria. Although Kaeya is a descendant of the Eclipse dynasty that ruled during Kanria's fall, while Arlecchino's ancestors hailed from the Crimson Moon dynasty which fell to civil war, as evident through her Bale Moon bloodfire. There are, of course, other characters from Kanria, such as Dainsleif, Capitano, and Piero, but they are all actual former citizens of the nation who bear the curse of immortality. Kaeya and Arlecchino are descendants who bear their own curses and destinies. During the Carrybear Archon quest, it was confirmed that Kaeya is a descendant of Abyss Order founder Clothar Alberic. Mona has a very suspicious voice line about Kaeya and the larger destiny that he has to fulfill that is associated with this heritage. Kaeya's surname, Alberic, is taken from one of Hoyoverse's favorite places to draw inspiration from, the Ring Cycle. In the story, Alberic is a Nibelung dwarf who steals a precious stash of gold from the Rhine Maidens, and forges the gold into a magic ring. Surname derived from a dwarf who stole gold to fashion into a magic ring? Descendant of the Eclipse dynasty? It starts to make sense how Kaeya may truly be our raven who stole the sun.
Have you ever seen the Owl of Dragonspine? If you look directly at it, it seems to see right through you, while letting go of none of its own secrets. Quite fascinating, don't you think?
Moving on to Hugo Vlad's background. This man has a big old traumatic backstory that is full of sadness. Born as an illegitimate son of the affluent Ravenlock family, his mother resented him for those heterochromatic eyes which gave away his background. She ended up selling him to the Ravenlock family. On his father's side, this wealthy family which belongs to the Topps conglomerate never actually cared for him. In fact, they actively tormented him. He lost the only little sister who was kind to him when the family conspired to kill her, and pinned the whole thing on him. They thought this would completely ruin any kind of standing Hugo had within the family, but his father ended up praising him for the act. Sometime after these events, Hugo would be taken in by a man named Jack, who was also looking after von Lycon. Jack would raise Hugo and Lycon in the ways of phantom thieves. After Jack's death, Lycon and Hugo grew the Phantom Thief organization of Mockingbird together. Mockingbird operates on the principle of chivalrous thievery, where they take from the rich and give to the poor. They also have a very strong principle of never taking lives, which comes from Jack's teachings. It would be Lycon and Hugo's difference in attitude towards this principle that would ultimately lead to their falling out. The thing is, Hugo believes in the principle that sometimes you can save further lives by taking one, while von Lycon takes after Jack in his belief that no one has the right to take something as precious as life away from someone else.
じっちゃんの言う通り、この世は不公平だ。公平さをもたらすというなら、誰かを傷つけた者には同等の痛みを与え、命を奪った者には等しく死を与えるべきだ。それに、命の重さなんて持ち主によるだろう。一人殺せば、その他大勢を救える命だってある。
I guess Hugo's just really caught up in trolley problems because he grew up around psychopathic rich people who are an active danger to society. And hey, some sweet vengeance against those lunatics who conspired to murder his sister would be kind of nice too. Hugo carried out a plot of vengeance against his family under the guise of a regular mission. And when Lycon found out about this, he left Mockingbird. So now this guy who already had long struggled with self-hatred because of his own contradictions, and his own inability to fully embrace the light or the dark, now he developed even more severe abandonment issues. I mean, seriously, like, years later, this guy is just not over the breakup.
視界に背いたのはお前だ。
相変わらず偉そうだ。
After the split with Lycan, Vivian would become Hugo's new partner in crime. He sees her as family, and has spoken with the proxy about how she reminds him of the sister he lost, Serene. We see an array of Hugo's various sides throughout the epilogue as he schemes and charms his way through this storyline. From the traumatized child, to the charming and devious thief, to the true darkness within him that arose from sadness and hurt. Hugo's story ultimately deals with accepting these darker sides of himself rather than trying to fight them off. He has to come to terms with himself, his own contradictions, and his past in order to move forward in a healthier way. But this doesn't come in the form of him abandoning all of his principles or his ways. It comes in the form of embracing his duality rather than rejecting it. And his character design is just full of this duality with the heterochromatic eyes and everything. There's even this whole persona-like sequence where you go into his mind palace and confront the shadow self. Hugo channels a lot of the same shrewd energy as Kaeya. He is also just literally up to no good, but somehow manages to balance that out with being an incredibly handsome and endearing man. He is exactly what you would expect from the prominent member of a Phantom Thieves gang.
お前が権力を求めていると信じて疑わなかった。全ては野心を満たすためで、てっきり何もかもを裁く神にでもなりたがっているのかと。
ああ、俺は神だと思う。自分自身の神だ。だが言うなれば、この世界では誰もが自分自身の神なのだ。変えられないことはたくさんあるが、俺たちがこの手で決められることも同じくらいある。言ったろう。俺を殺せるのも、俺を救えるのも、いつだって俺だけなんだと。
Now obviously, Hugo's story has been a bit more fleshed out than Kaeya's, because Kaeya's lore is heavily attached to subject matters that are being saved for closer to endgame. But there are still a lot of parallels to draw here. I was genuinely surprised at how much I found to work with, and it made me really excited. Obviously, they're both Ice Element characters within their respective universes. We'll just get that easy one out of the way. But it really is only the tip of the iceberg. Fuck, I walked right into that one. The little details that were included to create echoing symbolism between these two characters kept adding up the more I looked into it. As I said, it started with raw vibes regarding the how the raven stole the sun story. I was eyeing these coin-shaped emblems that are all over Hugo's outfit that seem to represent his duality through a sun and then the moon and stars. You know, day and night, which is the occurrence that the raven myth is meant to explain. The color scheme on these kind of reminds me of the treasure hoarder insignias from which Ashikai originally identified symbolism that matched this myth. With Hugo being an illegitimate son of the Ravenlock family, these gears started turning in my head, and I was like, is Hugo Vlad our raven who stole the sun in this story? From there it was really easy to compare him to Kaeya. They both have ties to gangs of thieves, considering Kaeya's deep connections among the treasure hoarders, and Hugo's status as a leader within Mockingbird. The treasure hoarders aren't necessarily organized under a chivalrous thieves principle, though. These obviously aren't meant to be one-to-one comparisons or anything. I mean, as shady as Kaeya is, he's still a knight. It's more about theming, vibes, feelings. Hugo's standard outwardly portrayal has definitely got more bravado to him compared to the slightly more subtle nature Kaeya usually exhibits. But that nature itself is very similar. Hugo Vlad is carrying these mixed thoughts about his own legacy. He has been tormented by the darkness inside of him because of his traumatic past as well as his connection to a Top's family. Meanwhile, Kaeya carries the shattered legacy of Khaenri'ah, and has these direct ties to the Abyss Order's origins. Hugo was a child who was born out of wedlock, while Kaeya's ancestor Clotar also had a son out of wedlock named Kaeya.
いや王室の貴族だった。だが私はずっと家族に用意された生活に不満を抱いていたんだ。そんな時、私は平民のとある美しい女性に出会った。彼女はモンドの血筋を持つもので、彼女こそが私の運命の相手だと確信したよ。カリベルトが生まれてからは、まさに苦難の連続だった。そのすべてが私の身勝手な行いのせいだ。それに私は、この子のそばにいてあげることができなかった。そして、この子は私の目の前でヒルチャールになったのだ。
And okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but once you bring Kaeya into this web of comparisons, it gets kind of interesting. So Hugo Vlad is obviously super vampire coded. Like, he's got the fangs, he talks about vampire movies when he first visits Random Play. Then there's our descendant of the Crimson Moon dynasty, Arlecchino, whose powers revolve around her fiery blood. And the thing with Arlecchino is her curse, plus the similarities between her charred hands and caterpillars, kind of implies that if she doesn't regulate her emotions well, she'll turn into a hilichurl. So, do with that what you will. In terms of personality, Kaeya and Hugo each, of course, have this sassy, shrewd manner of going about things. They each operate under similar anti-hero mentalities. The method to their madness exists outside of conventional morality, and they definitely aren't afraid of getting their own hands dirty. Which, speaking of that, regarding Hugo's whole inner mind palace sequence, if his inner demon is portrayed as this Bang Boo, then what the hell is Kaeya's inner demon? Fucking Baron Bunny? Hugo's also got this mockingbird coin that he always seems to be carrying around with him, and Kaeya has that one idol animation where he's, you know, flipping a coin. And let me tell you, I cannot get over how they intentionally use Hugo Vlad's dramatic way of speaking and hyperbolic metaphors to reference Genshin. Like, listen to these lines, I swear to God.
最初に訪ねた映画のことをまだ覚えているだろうか。悪魔の子という復讐を題材とした映画だ。未だに拝むことはできていないのだが、同名の別作品を見つけてね。その筋書きの中では、悪魔の子の真の正体は。
This has got to be referencing Genshin's demonic god naming theme derived from Ars Goetia.
だが、これは竜殺しの少年が悪しき竜になってしまうような物語じゃない。時には最初から悪しき竜となって、鋭い爪と牙、そして破壊する力を手にしなければ勝ち目がないこともある。だから俺はこの手を怪我し、この身に罪業を背負って、深淵そのものになる。
Slaying dragons? Becoming the abyss? Are we in the right game? I found it wild that von Lykon's quote about Hugo could quite literally act as a response to this quote that comes from Kaeya's second story. Justice is not an absolute principle, but is the result of striking that fine balance between strength and strategy. As for the details of how it's done, don't worry yourself too much about that. It is precisely because we are living in this era of disasters that I cannot acknowledge the so-called justice he believes in. Carving out a malignant tumor forcefully with sharp claws will ultimately only leave a scar named vengeance. Like, contextually, they don't bounce off of each other perfectly with how dramatic Lykon's metaphor is, but it still works far too well. Duality as well as deviation from conventional morals are at the core of each of these characters' writing. It's why a myth that combines trickery with the explanation for a day and night cycle is perfect underlying symbolism for these characters. Finally, I do believe some of the character development that happens on screen for Hugo are things that Kaeya has already gone through prior to the story, off screen, but they are also themes that may repeat in his life when he is faced with his true destiny. It would make a lot of sense to see Kaeya grappling with his identity and his inherited burdens later on in this story. The only person who can kill me, or save me, is me, aligns with Kaeya's energy, and I could see this becoming a core theme in his future as well. In fact, I think it would be a perfect mentality to echo within Kaeya's storyline. How does one decide between allegiance to his ancestry and allegiance to the nation he has called home, when that person's only allegiance is to himself? Hope you enjoyed this little analysis. Hoyoverse really does like to do this thing where they draw on similar elements and illustrate parallels even when they aren't directly connecting their games, and this was a really fun little one to notice. I know some players have been disappointed because Hugo's outfit isn't quite as heavily accessorized as you usually see with Hoyoverse designs, but the motifs that are there really do say a lot about him, and I really am a fan of his model, to be honest. Especially after the tweaks they made, rather subtle, but they went a long way. Meanwhile, Genshin's new version trailer felt like a weird fever dream for some reason, but there is a Mondstadt interlude quest, and Kaeya is featured in the version art, so hopefully we will get some new lore for him. Crumbs at the very least.